The Iberian Peninsula, commonly called Iberia, is the third largest European peninsula. It is located in the extreme southwest of the continent. The area is approximately 582,000 km². There are 3 countries in it: Spain, Portugal, Andorra, as well as a part of France and the British Overseas Territory of Gibraltar. Geography: the Iberian Peninsula is the westernmost of the 3 major southern European peninsulas: the Iberian, Italian, and Balkan. It is bordered on the southeast and east by the Mediterranean Sea, and on the north, west, and southwest by the Atlantic Ocean. The Pyrenees form the northeast edge of the peninsula, separating it from the rest of Europe. Its southern tip is very close to the northwest coast of Africa, separated from it by the Strait of Gibraltar. Name: Greek name: the English word Iberia was adapted from the use of the ancient Greek word unregistered trademark I² plus or minus by Greek geographers under the rule of the Roman Empire to refer to what is known today in English as the Iberian Peninsula. At that time, the name did not describe a single political entity or a distinct population of people. Strabo's Iberia was delineated from Celtica by the Pyrenees and included the entire landmass southwest of there. The ancient Greeks discovered the Iberian Peninsula by voyaging westward. Hecataeus of Miletus was the first known to use the term around 500 BC. Herodotus of Halicarnassus says of the Phocaeans that it was they who made the Greeks acquainted with Iberia. According to Strabo, prior historians used Iberia to mean the country this side of the A1/4 as far north as the river Rhone in France, but currently they set the Pyrenees as the limit. Polybius respects that limit, but identifies Iberia as the Mediterranean side as far south as Gibraltar, with the Atlantic side having no name. Elsewhere he says that Saguntum is on the seaward foot of the range of hills connecting Iberia and Celtiberia. Strabo refers to the Caritanians as people of the Iberian stock living in the Pyrenees, who are to be distinguished from either Celts or Celtiberians. Roman names. Generally, Greek authors used Iberia and Latin authors used Hispania, but when the Romans encountered the writings of the Greek geographers, they began to use the word Iberia and spoke occasionally of the Iberi. The first mention in Roman literature was by the annalist poet Quintus Ennius in 200 BC. The Romans had broad experience with the peoples on the peninsula acquired during the long conflict with Carthage. Virgil refers to the Hippocatos Iberus in his Georgics. The Roman geographers and other prose writers from the time of the late Roman Republic called the entire peninsula Hispania. As they became politically interested in the former Carthaginian territories, the Romans began to use the names Hispania Citeria and Hispania Ulterior for near and far Spain. Even at that time Hispania included Lusitania, Galatia, Celtiberia, Baetica, Cantabria and the territory of the Vascons, likely the ancestors of the present-day Basques. Strabo says that the Romans use Hispania and Iberia synonymously, distinguishing between the near and the far. He was living in a time when the peninsula was divided into Roman provinces, of which Bisha was supervised by the Senate, whereas the others were governed directly on behalf of the emperor. Whatever language may generally have been spoken on the peninsula soon gave way to Latin, except for that of the Vascons, which was preserved as a language isolate by the barrier of the Pyrenees. Etymology. The Iberian Peninsula has always been associated with the Bro River, Iberos in ancient Greek and Iberus or Heberus in Latin. The association was so well known it was hardly necessary to state. For example, Iberia was the country this side of the Iberus in Strabo. Pliny goes so far as to assert that the Greeks had called the whole of Spain Iberia because of the Hebrus River. The river appears in the Bro Treaty of 226 BC between Rome and Carthage, setting the limit of Carthaginian interest at the Bro. The fullest description of the treaty, stated in Appian, uses Iberus. With reference to this border, Polybius states that the native name is Iber, apparently the original word, stripped of its Greek or Latin os or us termination. The early range of these natives, stated by the geographers and historians to be from southern Spain to southern France along the Mediterranean coast, is marked by instances of a readable script expressing a yet unknown language, dubbed Iberian. Whether this was the native name or was given to them by the Greeks for their residence on the Bro remains unknown. Credence in Polybius imposes certain limitations on etymologizing. If the language remains unknown, the meanings of the words, including Iber, must also remain unknown. In modern Basque, the word Iber means valley or watered meadow, while Ibai means river, but there is no proof relating the etymology of the Bro River with these Basque names. Prehistory. Paleolithic. The Iberian Peninsula has been inhabited for at least 1 million years, as remains found in the sites at Atapuerca demonstrate. Among these sites is the cave of Grande Elena, where 6 hominin skeletons, dated between 780,000 and 1 million years ago, were found in 1994. Experts have debated whether these skeletons belong to the species Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, or a new species called Homo antecessor. Around 200,000 BC, during the Lower Paleolithic period, Neanderthals first entered the Iberian Peninsula. Around 70,000 BC, during the Middle Paleolithic period, the last ice age began and the Neanderthal Mysterian culture was established. Around 35,000 BC, during the Upper Paleolithic, the Neanderthal Kars-Centelperonian cultural period began. Emanating from southern France, this culture extended into the north of the peninsula. It continued to exist until around 28,000 BC, when Neanderthal man faced extinction. At about the 40th millennium BC, modern humans entered the Iberian Peninsula from southern France. Here, this genetically homogeneous population developed the M343 mutation, giving rise to the O1b haplogroup, still the most common in modern Portuguese and Spanish males. On the Iberian Peninsula, modern humans developed a series of different cultures, such as the Aurignacian, Gravettian, Solatraean and Magdalenian cultures, some of them characterized by complex forms of Paleolithic art. Neolithic. During the Neolithic expansion, various megalithic cultures developed in the Iberian Peninsula. An open seas navigation culture from the East Mediterranean, called the Cardium culture, also extended its influence to the eastern coasts of the peninsula, possibly as early as the 5th millennium BC. These people may have had some relation to the subsequent development of the Iberian civilization. Chalcolithic. In the Chalcolithic or Copper Age, a series of complex cultures developed that would give rise to the peninsula's first civilizations and to extensive exchange networks reaching to the Baltic, Middle East and North Africa. Around 2800 to 2700 BC, the Belgica culture, which produced the maritime Belgica, probably originated in the vibrant Copper-using communities of the Tagus estuary in Portugal and spread from there to many parts of Western Europe. Bronze Age. Bronze Age cultures developed beginning c. 1800 BC, when the civilization of Los Millers was followed by that of El Aga. From this center, bronze technology spread to other areas, such as those of the Bronze of Levante, southwestern Iberian Bronze and Cogatus I. In the Late Bronze Age, the urban civilization of Tartessos developed in the area of modern western Andalusia, characterized by Phoenician influence and using the Tartessian script for its Tartessian language, not related to the Iberian language. Early in the 1st millennium BC, several waves of pre-Celts and Celts migrated from Central Europe, thus partially changing the peninsula's ethnic landscape into Indo-European space in its northern and western regions. In northwestern Iberia, a Celtic culture developed, the Castro culture, with a large number of hill forts and some fortified cities. Protohistory. By the Iron Age, starting in the 7th century BC, the Iberian Peninsula consisted of complex agrarian and urban civilizations either pre-Celtic or Celtic, the cultures of the Iberians in the eastern and southern zones and the cultures of the Aquitanian in the western portion of the Pyrenees. The seafaring Phoenicians, Greeks and Carthaginians successively settled along the Mediterranean coast and founded trading colonies there over a period of several centuries. Around 1100 BC, Phoenician merchants founded the trading colony of Gadir or Gads near Tartessos. In the 8th century BC, the first Greek colonies, such as Emporion, were founded along the Mediterranean coast on the east, leaving the south coast to the Phoenicians. the Greeks coined the name Iberia, after the river Iber. In the 6th century BC, the Carthaginians arrived in the peninsula while struggling with the Greeks for control of the western Mediterranean. Their most important colony was Carthago Nova. History, Roman rule. In 218 BC, during the Second Punic War against the Carthaginians, the first Roman troops invaded the Iberian Peninsula and annexed it under Augustus after 2 centuries of war with the Celtic and Iberian tribes and the Phoenician, Greek and Carthaginian colonies, resulting in the creation of the province of Hispania. It was divided into Hispania Ulterior and Hispania Citerior during the late Roman Republic, and during the Roman Empire, it was divided into Hispania Tarraconensis in the northeast, Hispania Baetica in the south and Lusitania in the southwest. Hispania supplied the Roman Empire with food, olive oil, wine, and metal. The emperors Trajan, Hadrian, and Theodosius I, the philosopher Seneca, and the poets Martial and Lucan were born from families living on the peninsula. Germanic kingdoms. In the early 5th century, Germanic tribes invaded the peninsula, namely the Suebi, the Vandals and their allies, the Sarmatian Alans. Only the kingdom of the Suebi would endure after the arrival of another wave of Germanic invaders, the Visigoths, who conquered all of the Iberian Peninsula and expelled or partially integrated the Vandals and the Alans. The Visigoths eventually conquered the Suebi kingdom and its capital city Bracara in 584 585. They would also conquer the province of the Byzantine Empire of Spania in the south of the peninsula and the Balearic Islands. Islamic rule. In AD 711, a Muslim army invaded the Visigothic kingdom in Hispania. Under Tariq ibn Ziyad, the Islamic army landed at Gibraltar and brought most of the Iberian Peninsula under Islamic control in an 8-year campaign. Al-3/4 is the Arabic name given the Iberian Peninsula by its Muslim Berber and Arab conquerors. From the 8th–15th centuries, the Iberian Peninsula was incorporated into the Islamic world and became a center of culture and learning, especially during the Caliphate of Córdoba, which reached its height under the rule of Abd-ar-Rahman III. The Muslims, which were initially Arabs and Berbers, included local Iberian converts, the so-called Muladi, who formed the majority of the Iberian population by the year 1100. The Muslims were referred to by the generic name, Moors. Thus, before the so-called Reconquista gained momentum, the Iberian Peninsula had been transformed from a mainly Romance-speaking Christian land into a mainly Arabic-speaking Muslim land. However, pockets of Arabic and Romance-speaking Christians called Mozarabs survived throughout Al-Andalus, in addition to a large minority of Arabic-speaking Jews. Reconquest. Many of the ousted Gothic nobles took refuge in the unconquered North Asturian highlands. From there, they aimed to reconquer their lands from the Moors. This war of reconquest is known as the Reconquista. Christian and Muslim kingdoms fought and allied among themselves. The Muslim Taifa kings competed in patronage of the arts, the way of St. James attracted pilgrims from all Western Europe, and the Jewish population set the basis of Sephardic culture. During the Middle Ages, the peninsula housed many small states including Castile, Aragon, Navarre, Leeuwarden and Portugal. The peninsula was part of the Islamic Almohad Empire until they were finally uprooted. The last major Muslim stronghold was Granada, which was conquered by a combined Castilian and Aragonese force in 1492. Muslims and Jews throughout the period were variously tolerated or shown intolerance in different Christian kingdoms. However, after the conquest of Granada, all Muslims and Jews were ordered to convert to Christianity or face expulsion. Many Jews and Muslims fled to North Africa and the Ottoman Empire, while others publicly converted to Christianity and became known respectively as Morenos and Moriscos. However, many of these continued to practice their religion in secret. The Moriscos revolted several times and were ultimately forcibly expelled from Spain in the early 17th century. Post-Reconquest. The small states gradually amalgamated over time, with the exception of Portugal, even if for a brief period the whole peninsula was united politically under the Iberian Union. After that point, The modern position was reached in the peninsula now consists of the countries of Spain and Portugal, Andorra, French Sudan and Gibraltar. Geography and geology. Overall characteristics. The Iberian Peninsula extends from the southernmost extremity at Punta de Tarifa to the northernmost extremity at Estrecha de Bes Point over a distance between lines of latitude of about 865 km based on a degree length of 111 km per degree, and from the westernmost extremity at Cabo da Roca to the easternmost extremity at Cap de Creus over a distance between lines of longitude at 40 degree and latitude of about 1,155 km based on an estimated degree length of about 90 km. For that latitude, the irregular, roughly octagonal shape of the peninsula contained within this spherical quadrangle was compared to an ox hide by the geographer Strabo. About three-quarters of that rough octagon is the Meseta Central, a vast plateau ranging from 610 to 760 m in altitude. It is located approximately in the center, staggered slightly to the east and tilted slightly toward the west. It is ringed by mountains and contains the sources of most of the rivers, which find their way through gaps in the mountain barriers on all sides. Coastline. The coastline of the Iberian Peninsula is 3,313 km, 1,660 km on the Mediterranean side and 1,653 km on the Atlantic side. The coast has been inundated over time, with sea levels having risen from a minimum of 115 am lower than today at the last glacial maximum to its current level at 4,000 years BP. The coastal shelf created by sedimentation during that time remains below the surface. However, it was never very extensive on the Atlantic side, as the continental shelf drops rather steeply into the depths. An estimated 700 km length of Atlantic shelf is only 10 €65 km wide. At the 500 am isobath, on the edge, the shelf drops off to 1000 am. The submarine topography of the coastal waters of the Iberian Peninsula has been studied extensively in the process of drilling for oil. Ultimately, the shelf drops into the Bay of Biscay on the north, the Iberian Abyssal Plain at 4,800 am on the west and Tagus Abyssal Plain to the south. In the north, between the continental shelf and the abyss, is an extension, the Galicia Bank, a plateau also containing the Porto, Vigo and Vasco da Gama seamounts, creating the Galicia Interior Basin. The southern border of these features is marked by Nazara Copyright Canyon, splitting the continental shelf and leading directly into the abyss. Rivers. The major rivers flow through the wide valleys between the mountain systems. These are the Bro, Douro, Tagus, Guadiana and Guadalquivir. All rivers in the Iberian Peninsula are subject to seasonal variations in flow. The Tagus is the longest river in the peninsula and, like the Douro, flows westwards with its lower course in Portugal. The Guadiana bends southwards and forms the border between Spain and Portugal in the last stretch of its course. Mountains. The terrain of the Iberian Peninsula is largely mountainous. The major mountain systems are, the Pyrenees and their foothills, the Pre-Pyrenees, crossing the isthmus of the peninsula so completely as to allow no passage except by mountain road, trail, coastal road or tunnel. Aneto in the Maladetta Massif, at 3,404 m, is the highest point. The Cantabrian Mountains along the northern coast with the massive Picos de Europa. Tor de Cerrado, at 2,648 m, is the highest point. The Galicia Traesos Montes Massif in the northwest is made up of very old heavily eroded rocks. Penetrivinca, at 2,127 m, is the highest point. The Sistema Ibérica Copyright Rico, a complex system at the heart of the peninsula, in its central eastern region. It contains a great number of ranges and divides the watershed of the Tagus, Douro and Bro rivers. Moncayo, at 2,313 m, is the highest point. The Sistema Central, dividing the Iberian Plateau into a northern and a southern half and stretching into Portugal, is located in the Serra da Estrela. Pico Almanza in the Sierra de Gredos is the highest point, at 2,592 m. The Montes de Toledo, which also stretches into Portugal from the La Mancha natural region at the eastern end. Its highest point, at 1,603 m, is La Villuica in the Sierra de Villacas, Extremadura. The Sierra Morena, which divides the watershed of the Guadiana and Guadalquivir rivers. At 1,332 m, Bor plus or minus Wheeler is the highest point. The Beatix system, which stretches between Cádiz and Gibraltar and northeast towards Alicante province. It is divided into three subsystems: Beatix system, which begins west of the Sierra Sur de Jor copyright N, reaching the Mediterranean sea shores in Alicante province. La Sagra is the highest point at 2,382 m. Sub-Beatix system, which is in a central position within the Beatix systems, stretching from Cape Trafalgar in Cádiz province across Andalusia to the region of Murcia. The highest point, at 2,027 am, is P plus or minus A de la Cruz in Sierra Arana. Beatix system, located in the far southeastern area stretching between Gibraltar across the Mediterranean coastal Andalusian provinces. It includes the highest point in the peninsula, the 3,478 m high Mulhaca copyright N in the Sierra Nevada. Geology. The Iberian Peninsula contains rocks of every geological period from the Ediaca into the recent, and almost every kind of rock is represented. World-class mineral deposits can also be found there. The core of the Iberian Peninsula consists of a Hercynian cratonic block known as the Iberian Massif. On the northeast, this is bounded by the Pyrenean Fold Belt, and on the southeast it is bounded by the Betic Fold Chain. These two fold chains are part of the Alpine Belt. To the west, the peninsula is delimited by the continental boundary formed by the magma pore opening of the Atlantic Ocean. The Hercynian Fold Belt is mostly buried by Mesozoic and Tertiary cover rocks to the east, but nevertheless outcrops through the Iberian Chain and the Catalan coastal ranges. Modern countries and territories, political divisions of the Iberian Peninsula sorted by area, urbanization, major urban areas, major cities. Various other notable cities are also present on the peninsula, like Ilk, Oviedo, Badalona and Terrassa in Spain, and Braga, Imadra, Coimbra and Setúbal in Portugal. Major metropolitan areas. The main metropolitan areas of the Iberian Peninsula are Madrid, Barcelona, Lisbon, Valencia, Porto, Seville, Bilbao, Málaga, Central Asturias, Alicante, Ilk, Murcia, Braga and Coimbra. Ecology. Forest. The woodlands of the Iberian Peninsula are distinct ecosystems. Although the various regions are each characterized by distinct vegetation, there are some similarities across the peninsula. While the borders between these regions are not clearly defined, there is a mutual influence that makes it very hard to establish boundaries, and some species find their optimal habitat in the intermediate areas. East Atlantic Flyway. The Iberian Peninsula is an important stopover on the East Atlantic Flyway for birds migrating from northern Europe to Africa. For example, curlew sandpipers rest in the region of Cadiz Bay. In addition to the birds migrating through, some 7 million wading birds from the north spend the winter in the estuaries and wetlands of the Iberian Peninsula, mainly at locations on the Atlantic coast. In Galicia are Rio de Arousa, Rio de Ortigueira, Rio de Corm and Rio de Lakes. In Portugal, the Aveiro Lagoon hosts Recurvirostra abaceta, ringed plover, grey plover and little stint. Ribatejo province on the Tagus River supports Recurvirostra araceta, grey plover, dunlin, bar-tailed godwit and common red shank. In the Sado estuary are dunlin, Eurasian curlew, grey plover and common red shank. The Algarve hosts red knot, grenshank and turnstone. The Marismas de Guadalquivir region of Andalusia and the Salinas de Cádiz are especially rich in wintering wading birds, Kentish plover, ringed plover, sandling, and black-tailed godwit in addition to the others. And finally, the Bro Delta is home to all the species mentioned above. Languages. Except for Basque, which is of unknown origin, most modern Iberian languages descend from Vulgar Latin. Throughout history, many different languages have been spoken in the Iberian Peninsula, contributing to the formation and differentiation of the contemporaneous languages of Iberia. However, most of them have become extinct or fallen into disuse. Basque is the only non-Indo-European surviving language in Iberia and Western Europe. In modern times, Spanish, Portuguese, Catalan, Galician and Basque are the most widely spoken languages in the Iberian Peninsula. Spanish and Portuguese have expanded beyond Iberia to the rest of the world, becoming global languages. See also, references. External links, Arioso, Paola. Diego Miozzi. Iberian Peninsula Eurocent links. Stone pages. Retrieved December 5, 2008. Flores, Carlos. Nicole Marcamea. Ana M. Gonzalez. Peter J. Oefner. Pia Dong Shen. Jose A. Perez. Antonio Rojas. Jose M. Laruga. Peter A. Underhill. Reduced genetic structure of the Iberian Peninsula revealed by Y chromosome analysis, implications for population demography. European Journal of Human Genetics 12, 855 Euro 863 doi, 10.1038/SJJHG. 5,201,225. PMIDA 15,280,900. Retrieved December 5, 2008. Lloyd, Nick. Iberia Nature, A Guide to the Environment, Climate, Wildlife, Geography and Nature of Spain. Retrieved December 4, 2008. Silva, Luis Fregada. Ethnologic Map of Pre-Roman Iberia. New version number 10. Associa Picavolt Poundo Campo Arqueola Cubed Gico de Tavira, Tavira, Portugal. Retrieved December 4, 2008. A.